Hey, just wanted to jump on and kind of go through some stuff I've been kind of reading. I've been reading a lot about inflation and then speculation that we're in a housing bubble. And it got me thinking, what is a bubble versus inflation? And would we know the difference if we're in a bubble versus inflation? So just kind of pulling some basic information, trying to answer that question for myself. So I'd kind of share my thoughts out loud here. So I'll start by sharing my screen here. Share screen. They're getting a little faster at this one now. Okay, so we're going to go to this one. If you can read this one better. Okay, so start out with the definition of a bubble. It's an economic cycle that is characterized by rapid escalation of market value, particularly in the price of assets. This fast inflation is followed by a quick decrease in value or contraction. Okay, so we wouldn't know if it's a bubble till after it crashes, theoretically, because all asset classes are inflating or in a bubble right now. So the speculation is this bubble going to burst, or is this just going to be inflation transitory or here to stay? So if we kind of go into inflation, they kind of pull the definition of demand pull inflation. That's when prices go by aggregate demand in the economy. Demand outpaces supply, basically, and then that creates inflation. Kind of gets into the Keynesian theory on this one. So when we have excessive demand in the housing market, which we do, we have a shortage of inventory, so lack of inventory and excessive demand. Some of that demand is driven by the stimulus checks. People have extra money for down payment, plus the low interest rates, which creates more of that demand, and that pushes the pricing up with the low supply. Cost push inflation. And then we're seeing the cost push because if you look at the building materials and all the components that go into building the houses, the copper, the lumber, all of that is going up. So that's a cost push inflation. So we're kind of experiencing all of this at once. And then we have monetary inflation. Okay, so monetary inflation, well, we know that the Fed is just printing money. So that's also driving inflation. So we kind of have, it seems to me like all three of these inflationary factors being pushed into this housing market at one time. So that leads me to believe that this is not like a short-term bubble where this asset class is just, it's being driven higher by exuberant demand. There's actually real things driving the value here, right or wrong. It's inflationary driven. So if we look at the M1 component on the Fed of printing money, we're at what? I can't even say that number, 18 trillion, 19 trillion. You can see that this is just the amount of money that the Fed has thrown into stimulus here. It's very evident in the M1 supply. In the M1 definition, money supply, physical currency and coin, demand, traveler's checks, other deposits. So it doesn't include everything. So then we kind of look at the M3, which combines M1, M2, and M3. And that doesn't seem so out of line now because this takes into account some other items going on. But we're still at almost 20 trillion. So we're printing a ton of money into the system. So this is cash floating around. And this cash is going to chase the asset prices. And one of the asset classes will be housing. So that's kind of what we have going on here. So I kind of pulled this chart off of Fred, and what I'm trying to compare is some asset classes. So we have the S&P Case-Shiller U.S. Home Price Index. That is the blue line. So you can kind of see the housing bubble here. And then the Consumer Price Index for all consumers, that's the red line. So you can see that just slowly goes up over time, just steadily. The M3 is what we just talked about. That's the money supply. That's the green line. And look at how sharp that spikes. And then the Dow Jones Industrial Average, that's the purple line. This is a little different frequency reporting. That's why all the jagged lines. Try to get my cursor out of your way here so you can read that. But you can kind of see that as we printed money on the M3, the green, so the green line there, all the asset classes started moving up, including housing. And then if you look at the housing bubble here, the Case-Shiller index versus the M3 supply, we were clearly in a bubble by this metric, right? We exceeded that M3, the speed of that M3 printing. Now, if you look at that M3, it looks like we have a long ways to go before we're caught up to that M3. So if that's the scientific method on this, and I know there's other components that go into this, but from this perspective, it looks like house prices are going to continue to go up, as well as all other asset classes. Another way to phrase that is the value of the dollar is dropping. House prices are not increasing. It's just the value of the dollar has been printed so much that it takes a lot more dollars to buy the same house. That's what I think we're experiencing right now. I'm still kind of keeping my eyes open, trying to look at it from different angles, but I'd be curious on what your input is on this and see what your feedback is. So that's all I got for today. We'll be in touch. Have a good one.